This is KM Weiland, and you are listening to the 363rd episode of the Helping Writers Become Authors podcast. Happy Thanksgiving week. I hope you're gearing up for a wonderful week of family, friends, football, good food, and maybe some good shopping deals. I'm considering doing my first ever Black Friday shopping trip, so wish me luck. As always this year, I am overwhelmed with things to be thankful for. It's been a challenging year for me in many ways due to some unexpected developments in my personal life, but I feel it has been a year in which God has used those same challenges to bless me in ways I wouldn't even have been able to imagine. One blessing is simply the amazing Indian summer that continues to make this the warmest fall on record. As I take my coffee, my notebook, and my iPad outside to my writing table every morning, I feel incredibly thankful to be able to immerse myself in the beautiful struggles of imagination and creation. And I'm just as thankful to get to share the beauty and the struggle of the artistic life with all of you. Happy Thanksgiving. The latest post on my blog is how to write stories readers will find unexpected. If you want to write stories readers will find unexpected and that will delight them with the realism of your plot twists, you need to learn about the double switcheroo. To read the post, visit my site at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. And now I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast entitled How to Outline for NaNoWriMo Part 8, Making the Most of Character Interviews. Plot and character aren't so different after all. In fact, in many ways, they're the same thing. Over the course of the last 7 episodes, as you've focused on outlining your plot, you've also been outlining your characters, perhaps without even knowing it. But now it's time to finally focus exclusively on character interviews. By this point in the outline, you've already figured out the inherent factors of character arc that will drive your story's plot and theme. You know your character's lies and truths, wants and needs, and backstory ghosts and motivations. You know about the normal world in which your protagonist will start the story. And you know how he will change and where he will end up by the story's end. You also have a firm grip on your supporting cast and their respective desires, and where appropriate, their arcs as well. These are the most important aspects of your characters, and if you're so inclined, you can take off and write them into the first draft right now. However, there's one extra step I always take in my outline: character interviews. As you'll see in a second, I use an extensive list of questions to help me understand my characters inside out, everything from their deepest fears to their favorite foods. Some of the answers will show up in the story, many won't. And character interviews require a decent outlay of time. I generally spend upwards of 6 hours on each interview. So why bother? When you already know all the important thematic stuff about your characters, why do you need to bother with the trivial stuff? Can't you just discover everything you need as you write the first draft? Certainly, you can. And inevitably, there will always be important aspects of your characters you won't learn until you actually start writing them. But I've discovered character interviews can make all the difference in both the ease of writing a new character and his success in driving the plot. In the past, when I've chosen to skip an interview, the character too often fails to be as realized as those I did interview. Even though I do discover my characters as I write about them, I never understand them as fully as I should if I don't interview them beforehand. Now, depending on how many of your characters you decide to interview, and we'll talk about that more in just a bit, character interviews can be a lengthy part of the outline, but they're always worth it. And in my experience, they are often one of the easiest and most enjoyable parts of the outline. With each new novel I write, I'm always adding new questions to my character interviews. My list started out with the basics, but the questions I look for these days are the ones that will help me dig down into the heart of the characters to find their interesting motivations and contradictions. The list now includes over 120 questions curated from multiple sources over the years. If you see a question you originated, then thank you. I've offered my interview list before in several different resources, including the Outlining Your Novel workbook. But since I'm always updating it, I'm going to include the latest version here. And you can, of course, find the text and printable version on my website at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. So my list of character interview questions are name, background, birthday, place of birth, parents and siblings, economic and social status when growing up, ethnic background, places lived, education, pre-existing unique skills the character will use to solve plot problems, jobs, salary. If he could do anything other than what he does, what would it be? Travel, friends, how do people view this character? Who does he live with? Who does he fight with? Who does he spend time with? Who does he wish he could spend time with? What people depend on him and why? Who are the people he most admires? Enemies, dating or marriage, children, relationship with God, outlook on life. What's his opinion of himself? What, if anything, would he like to change about his life? What are his personal demons? Is he lying to himself about something? Is he optimistic or pessimistic? Real or feigned? What's his morality level? Confidence level? What's his self-control and self-discipline level? What's a typical day for him like? And his physical appearance, his physical build, posture, head shape, eyes, nose, mouth, hair, skin. Does he have any tattoos, piercings, scars? What's his voice sound like? What do people notice first about his appearance? What kind of clothes does he wear? How does he see himself? What 5 words would he use to describe himself? What 5 words would his best friend use to describe him? List the identities of this character, for example, mother, lover, soldier, etc., in order of priority to this person. What's his degree of self-awareness? What's his greatest joy? What's the thing that's keeping him alive? His greatest pain? Does he have good health or disabilities, any handicaps? And basic characteristics, personality type, love language, strongest and weakest character traits. What are 3 rules he lives by? What's his public identity? And does that ironically contrast with a hidden interior self? What's his default personality trait? Default argument tactic? Does he have any physical vulnerabilities? How about emotional vulnerabilities? What are the things that make him irrationally angry? What are the things that make him cry? His fears? His talents? What do people like best about him? What are his interests and favorites? What's his political leaning? Does he have any collections? What's his favorite food and drink? Favorite music? Favorite books? Favorite movies? Favorite sports or recreation? Favorite color? What is the best way to spend a weekend? What's a great gift for this person? Does he have any pets? Does he own any vehicles? And what are his typical expressions when he's happy, angry, frustrated, sad, or afraid? What would be some of his idiosyncrasies? What does he laugh or jeer at? What are some ways to cheer up this person? What are some ways to annoy this person? What are his hopes and dreams, and how does he plan to accomplish these dreams? What is the worst thing he's ever done? His greatest success, his biggest trauma, his greatest embarrassment. This character is the kind of person who, fill in the blank, what do you love most about this character? Why will readers sympathize with this person right away? What will his voice on the page sound like? What is his core need, and does he have any corresponding psychological maneuvers to help him cope with it or try to gain it in an unhealthy way? And finally, write an anecdote of a defining moment in this character's life. Now, implementing the character interview is easy. You just sit down and start answering. This is perhaps the most guided part of my outlining process, since it is, in essence, a fill-in-the-blanks exercise. However, as with any part of a successful outline, your answers to the character interview should not be random. Writers sometimes ask how they're supposed to come up with answers to the questions. Are you supposed to just sit down and start writing down any old answer that comes to mind? Definitely not. There's a reason we've waited until almost the very end of the outlining process to work on character interviews. By this point, you will have discovered your characters. By now, they will be real people living within a real plot. Their shape and essence should be very clear to you. And if you're like me, you may even have cast your characters using actors and other real-life personalities to provide distinct faces and physiques that anchor characters in your mind. In filling out the character interviews, you will inevitably run up against a few questions for which you don't know the answers, and you'll have to brainstorm something on the spot. But most of the answers should be evident from what you already know about your characters and plot. For example, as I was interviewing Thorn, a new character for my Portal Fantasy sequel, Dreambreaker, I didn't have to make something up in answering the question, if he could do anything other than what he does, what would it be? The answer came easily. It was a discovery more than an on-the-spot creation. It was a solidifying of what I already understood about the character's essence. I wrote, if he could do anything he wanted, honestly, he'd probably still be a gambler, but with credibility. He sometimes dreams of owning his own gambling establishment, but in truth, the responsibility would probably kill him. As it is, he lives life on his own terms and he likes it that way, if only he were not constantly derided for it. He feels like if only the world accepted him and gave him his due, he would be happy and whole. So how should you answer the questions? Short answer is any way you want to. If you want to literally interview the character and have him respond in his own words, go for it. If you will be best served by short one-word answers, that works too. However, I recommend continuing with the same conversational style you used in the previous sections of the general sketches. Just muse aloud on the page, writing whatever comes to mind about the character. Most of my answers are at least a couple of sentences and often a paragraph or two. Some of the questions will be irrelevant to your character and you can skip those outright. The interviews will provide their greatest benefit simply in helping you solidify your characters into fully rounded, nuanced human beings in your own mind. They will have fulfilled their greatest value simply in being written down. However, unlike much of the general sketches, character interviews supply information in a format you can use throughout the drafting process. Once you have them written down, they provide the further benefit of being a handy resource for referencing facts about your characters throughout the writing process. I collect all my interviews in folders in Scrivener and refer to them frequently whenever I have a continuity question about eye color, birth date, or when I need inspiration for how a character might react when he's angry or frustrated in a particular scene, that kind of thing. Now, the interviews are also easily searchable that way, and you save time in the long run when you're stalled on a character detail that would otherwise need to be brainstormed on the spot and bringing your current scene to a screeching halt. Now, obviously, you're probably not going to want to interview every single one of your characters, especially if you have a large cast. So how do you triage your cast to determine which gets full-fledged interviews and which do not? Ultimately, this will be a personal decision. Which characters are integral to your story? Which characters do you feel you don't fully understand yet? My own personal rule of thumb is that all POV characters get interviews and all antagonists get interviews. If I'm going to be in a character's head, I need to fully understand how he thinks and what made him the way he is. As for antagonists, I admit it, I used to skimp on their interviews. The other thing I admit is that antagonists have always been a weakness in my writing. So finally, on the last two outlines, I put two and two together and realized that maybe, just maybe, the reason my antagonists were challenging me in the first draft was because I wasn't taking the time to fully understand them and their motivations in the outline. So I started doing completed interviews for them, and boom, my antagonists immediately improved. Start with your protagonist and work your way through your important characters until you have a fat dossier full of everything you need to create these characters from the ground up and power them through your plot. And have fun. This section of the outline is a no-pressure way to get to spend time with some of the most fascinating people you'll ever meet. And stay tuned. Next week, we're going to talk about the final step in the outlining process, the scene outline. Thank you for listening to the Wordplay Podcast. To read a transcript of this episode, you can visit my website at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. And be sure to check back again next week.